geared toward owner-occupied homesteads and rental properties for that matter too, you're particularly exposed to what that's going to mean for your school district's tax base. On slide 6, so really what I want to start with is the two charts that are on the bottom, but especially the one that's on the bottom left. What we're looking at on the bottom left is the value of deductions that your homestead property taxpayers can pay or can collect, or really can save on. For taxes payable in 2025 last year, that was $3.7 million. So keep in mind, we're in that cycle now where through 2031, we're going to be getting toward this percentage-based system. So what that means is homestead deductions are going to ramp up each year between now and 2031. What that translates to ultimately is what we're looking at the chart on the top left. And I recognize that the text is coming through a little funny here, but the lines still hold. So what we're looking at on the green line is a projection of gross assessed value within the community. So that's just kind of the market value of properties. We assume that gross assessed values are going to continue to rise. Maybe not at the pace they have over the last 5 years, but we still see them going up. But we see a disconnect between gross assessed values going up and those blue lines, which are net assessed values. So even as gross assessed values go up, because those deductions are going to come on at a faster pace than we think values are going to go up, your taxable value or your net assessed value we see coming down. This is a normal pattern around the state. Most Indiana school districts have a chart in the top left that looks somewhat like that. Yours again is being driven by really the homestead deductions in particular. So it's really kind of at this moment where I like to remind school boards as we talk with them, you know, when you're working with Greg to set your budget each fall, one of the pieces that you adopt is your tax rate. And the tax rate's, it's a relatively simple fraction. In the numerator, you have your levy, or the dollars you're going to raise, and in the denominator, you have your assessed value. Well, even if you held that levy still in the numerator, if you push down the denominator, that's going to increase the tax rate. And that's what we're going to see all across Indiana over the next 5 years, is tax rates are going to go up. That doesn't necessarily mean tax burdens are going up, but it's a mentality shift for us because we've not been used to that for a while. This is a different way of just taking a look at your net assessed value. You know, I think it's important to acknowledge what we see in the Navy, which is that, you know, in the years since COVID and really in a suburban and growing community like this one, even in the few years before, net assessed values did go up quite a bit. That's partially going to be driven by housing growth, of course. I mean, you have more of that here than almost anywhere in the state. But that's also driven by what we all see as we look at the values of our homes. They are higher today than they were, you know, 5 years ago. And that's really what the General Assembly reacted to when they implemented Senate Enrolled Act 1 last year, is they wanted to kind of reverse course on growth and assessed values, and they did. So what we see in the 5 years after that, again, as those deductions come on, is we anticipate net assessed values on an annual basis likely coming down year over year. So again, going back to that fraction, just each year if we see assessed values coming down, we're looking at more than likely 5 straight years of tax rates going up. After 2031, you'll notice that it kind of gets back to sort of a normal pattern again. That's when deductions are fully phased in, and so net assessed values go back to kind of tracking gross assessed values at that point. So this piece is one that your school district has been used to navigating, but you've got a new element to it. So you've been used to navigating circuit breaker loss. We mentioned that 90% of your homestead taxpayers are already there today, so almost every owner-occupied homestead is at their cap today. What's new for this year, again, is that 10% credit, or for most of your taxpayers, or many of them at least, it's a $300 credit on the tax bill. That's that kind of orange piece in 2026, and it shifts to a gray color from 2027 onward. That's going to be an additional unfunded credit, which, starting in 2027, takes money away from your operations fund. In 2026, the school district has the option to spread it between the debt service fund and the operations fund. We've assumed that the school district's going to do that. I don't know if you guys have made that. Okay. Probably 9 out of 10 school districts around the state we think are going to make that decision. It safeguards your operations fund for 1 more year. But starting in 2027, this impact is fully on your operations fund. So in Westfield, we anticipate that you're going to continue navigating circuit breaker loss. But on top of that, you're also going to have this new 10% $300 credit that's kind of built into the model now and will always be part of the picture. And so again, circuit breaker and the 10% credit are unfunded credits, which means the levy that you adopt for the operations fund will ultimately be reduced by the amount that we're displaying on this chart year over year. Districts that are in a position like this, and I used to serve in a district that had high circuit breaker loss as well. Districts that are in a position like this are often the districts that have an operating referendum. It's really how you can fund your operations. Okay, this slide just breaks away from a moment from the kind of property tax piece, because I think every district has to tell their story, and this is a piece of Westfield Washington's story. So this is slide 9, by the way, if you're following on the paper. What we've got here is the 290 school districts in Indiana, going from left to right by the state funding per pupil for each of the school districts. So it's normalized for the number of students. We have school districts with 600 kids. We have school districts with 20,000 kids. You're a larger district, but it's normalized for that. And what we're displaying here is where Westfield Washington falls relative to most of the state when it comes to state funding. This isn't a new story to you. This is something I'm certain everybody in this room is familiar with. It's one of your challenges. State funding is geared in certain senses toward school districts with, poverty. And that's not really where Westfield Washington is going to land when it comes to state funding. The other pieces are SPED and CTE and honors and non-English speaking. So those parts do balance out, but essentially it's going to be complexity. The school districts that are on the farthest left end of this are going to be the most complex. On the farthest right are the least complex. If I'm in your shoes, if I'm in Greg's shoes, one of the stories I would be telling frequently is it's hard to recruit teachers anywhere. And this is the pot of money that you use to pay your teaching staff and your instructional staff. And so you've got about a $5,000 disadvantage compared to the state average. And that's just one of the challenges for this district to overcome. Okay, I want to kind of navigate from assessed values and sort of those pieces and get into some referendum components. But I'd be happy to answer any questions if there's anything on anybody's mind.
Real quick, can you just introduce yourself and who you work for so that people outside this room know?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, sure, I apologize I didn't do that. My name's Matt Parkinson. I'm with Policy Analytics. Policy Analytics is a small business based in Indianapolis that does fiscal and technical analysis for school districts and local governments around the state. We work with about half the school districts in the state at this point. I've been the CFO at 2 central Indiana districts. I was the CFO at MSD Warren Township on the east side of Indianapolis, and then Danville Community Schools, which is in Hendricks County. And then I spent about 5.5 years working for DLGF before I got into the school space.
Thank you.
Yeah, you got it. Okay, so referendum-specific data for Westfield Washington. One of the, I'd say, truest forms of tax relief that the General Assembly delivered was on an operating referendum fund. And the reason for that is an operating referendum is kind of classic property taxes. And what I mean by that is it's almost like property taxes before circuit breaker. It's really just net assessed value multiplied by a tax rate, and that's the amount of revenue that you generate. Well, going back to those slides we've been looking at, we've been used to net assessed values going up, and so if you multiply a fixed tax rate times increasing assessed values, your revenue goes up. Well, we're in the opposite position now. An operating referendum has a fixed capped tax rate, but net assessed values we believe are going to come down. What that means is for any school district with an operating referendum, chances are they're in their highest year now, or perhaps 2025 was the highest year, in your case 2026 we think. You're likely in your highest year of revenue for a referendum fund that you're going to have for the foreseeable future. But to pair with that, the things that you're paying for out of a referendum fund are probably not going to hold static, let alone come down in cost. So that creates kind of your fundamental challenge for an operating referendum. So what we're looking at for the bottom piece of these the stack column chart is this is the revenue that we would anticipate your school district collecting on your existing operating referendum rate, 17 cents. So this year we anticipate you'll collect 13.7 million. Next year at that same rate, it would go to 13.4, 13.2, 13, and so on. What we're displaying on the top half is had we not had property tax reform and we kept that same assessed value and the same gross assessed value assumptions, but really just didn't phase in those new deductions, how much would we expect your school district to collect? And in the first year, you're over $1 million in difference, and it grows from there. So that's, just to balance it, that's to the benefit of the taxpayer. I mean, the taxpayer will be seeing tax relief through this. But also the voters voted to provide support for the school district at a certain level. And that's not what the revenue is going to look like moving forward. So that's really what I think kind of creates this conversation is any school district in this position has to take a look at, kind of the reality we're looking at here and say, is there something we need to do from a revenue perspective to make sure that we can deliver services? So what we've demonstrated on this slide, I really want to focus on the bottom and the top, and then I'll sort of explain what we're doing with that one in the middle. The bottom orange line is really the same data that we were just looking at on the slide before. This is the levy that we would anticipate on your current tax rate, multiplied against that declining net assessed value, and then it starts to grow again after 2031. In the navy line on the top, working with district administration, we've identified a target levy that the school district could consider, and we're showing the amount of revenue that could be raised. The dotted orange line in the middle is how much revenue the school district would raise, again, at that fixed rate, but without property tax reform. I'll probably, if they're interested, I could probably lean on district administration to describe sort of where that $27 million number came from. It came from, anticipated needs and costs, or we can kind of keep going through the materials, however you guys prefer.
Sure, do you want to share? I'm more than happy to as well.
Why don't you start, Greg, and then I'll jump in.
Sure, so what we were looking at with that number, with that levy is, thank you. What we were looking at to begin with that number was calculating out if we kept basically with the 17 cents that we are currently at, if you then take into all the factors that Matt has been talking about, that base number was where we would be at with that 17 cents. That's kind of where we were at. Then upon that, there was some additional programs, a safety piece, and I'll let Dr. Atha possibly speak a little bit more into that. Taking a look also to consider some of the growth, a moderate growth, like a 4% each particular year, to come up with those particular amounts or the levies. And so when we get to those levy amounts, or that $27 million to begin with, that's the baseline as to how those were calculated out and then moving forward.
Yeah, so one of the things I think, as Dr. Hunt said, we passed a referendum in November of 22, and we had looked out 8 years. We lowered our rate 3 cents because we knew our net assessed evaluation would continue to increase, and over that 8-year period would generate more levy, more dollars for us. And at that time, Dr. Kaiser talked about adding highly trained school resource officers into every school, and the other needs that we would have as a growing district. So some of those are obviously in Hamilton County. We are in a very competitive market for teachers, and so being able to retain our excellent teachers that we have and also then attract teachers is really important to us. And as we grow, as Matt talked about, the state dollars being below average, the more students we get, actually the gap grows because we're below average. So our ability to attract new teachers as we grow is difficult. So that's part of what the referendum does. So that gap, as we laid out, and we said, okay, over the next 8 years, what do we need? And also to hedge against any changes legislators may need, we laid out a budget, and then we used our projected gross assessed valuation. So what other things we're doing? Obviously, the competitive pay and benefits for all staff, because as we've grown and had tax caps, we haven't kept pace. As we check the market with many of our positions, some of them are lagging 10% behind in the market. We want to maintain and continue to maintain small class size. We believe that is a key to our success. But we also want to get to that school safety piece that we have not been able to, because What Matt didn't talk about, he showed on the screen a couple screens before, even though our voters approved 17 cents. I think if you want to go back a couple of slides, Matt, one more. In 2005, we were randomly capped by the legislators, by state legislation, at 14.69, which you can see was just over the 10 million. So that cost us almost $3 million. And then this year, so over the last 24, 25 plus this year, we have, because of legislation, missed out on more than $4 million that we believed we were approved to collect, and we haven't. So some of that gap, you can go back, is to make up for those losses and then to continue to operate. I don't think we have probably really addressed the fact that as we open 2 new elementary schools this year, and we're really converting from our 9 schools plus our early learning center to 6 elementaries, 1 middle, 1 high school, and then the early learning, and then we'll have a second middle school in 2027. We're projecting right now, with after the rebalancing, placing staff, and now trying to staff those buildings, we're going to have an additional $1.4 million to the education fund because of our growth and the cost of opening 1 additional school this year, technically is what it is, we're +1. And then we'll have a similar impact. So over the next 2 years, a $3 million impact. So in order to address those as well, we felt like, okay, let's set, we started saying, okay, what is the levy? Put it to the projected property tax with the new Senate Enrolled Act 1, and that's where we came up. We believe this reflects worst case scenario over the next 8 years is what you see on the screen. And so then when you put it to Matt's projection for net assessed evaluation, that's the rate and the levy that we need, or right now he's showing, I think, the rate. Or the levy, nope. Yeah, the levy, is that what that is?
So the blue line is what we thought we were getting when we did the referendum in 2022, but in reality, it's the dark orange line that we will be getting.
So what I'd say on this screen, and Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, the orange line is what we will be getting, so you can see our revenues going down. The dotted orange line is a projection of where we would have gone. And then the blue line is what we believe that we need to meet the school safety that our community wants with a highly trained school resource officer, to offset the impact, the operational impact in the education fund of opening a new school this year and a new school next year, and then to also address the strain on our revenues to the $4.1 million that we weren't able to collect.
Right.
We have gone through all our reserves, so we want to build those back up into a prudent range. And so, and then we also want to prepare for, as you can see, there is no, we could almost always count on an increase in our net assessed evaluation to help with our growth and with inflation. As you can see, the orange line is actually going down. So there's a piece in there that's also a moderate 4% increase a year to help offset our growth and inflation. If folks haven't looked, I think diesel fuel for our buses is over $5 a gallon. And I don't know if you want to speak
Well,
to.
yeah, and I'm gonna mention 2 other pieces. As Matt mentioned, the fact of what the impact is going to be to our operations fund due to Senate Enrolled Act 1. We have to offset, obviously, and supplement that operations fund. So 2 of the areas in which we are currently, our referendum dollars go to is to offset utility costs. So utilities is one and benefits is another, which obviously there's a transfer amount from the education fund to the operations fund. We've limited that amount by using that referendum to limit that so there's not as high of a transfer amount. So as we think about those two areas, the benefits as well as our utility costs, again, like Dr. Athan mentioned, the fact that we have inflation and what's happening with inflation and the cost of our utilities and our benefits, again, as a growing district, that's also something that we use as calculating out moving forward that impact of the levy that we're going to be needing.
So with that, Matt, I'll let you jump, because we can add in, as you go to your next slides,
Sounds
more
good.
context if we need to.
Okay, sounds good. So this is really kind of comparable data, but it converts from the levy to the property tax rate. And so we've projected out to collect that roughly $27 million in 2027 that the school district would require a rate of just under 35 cents. And then it would grow on our net assessed value assumptions up to a peak of 43 cents in 2031, at which point it starts to decline again. And it starts declining at that point because we see assessed values most likely going up by more than that kind of 4% inflationary target. So for the overall school rate, Westfield Washington is growing, taking on construction projects. School districts around Indiana are going to see increasing property tax rates, and there probably is very little that anybody in this room can do either. The property tax rate, even independent of the referendum conversation, is almost certainly going to go up in this community, and again, almost everywhere in the state. We're going to have a slide in just a moment that shows that doesn't necessarily, that's not necessarily consistent with what's going to happen with the property tax bills. So we see your property tax rate, even if we stick on that kind of orange and the teal line that's below it, we see you going from $1.28 to $1.42 next year to $1.57 in the year after that, and then just kind of steadily growing. The referendum rate is somewhat higher, and so at this rate it would push a little bit higher, and then it would basically stay on the same trajectory, just with that kind of somewhat elevated rate built in from the first year. So when a school district's considering a referendum, and I say this as somebody that's been part of 2 referendum efforts myself, I think it's really important to acknowledge that it's a tax conversation. That's what it is. We're asking, when we go through conversations like these, when I went through it twice myself, we're asking community members to make an investment in a school system's programs. And the trade-off for that is we acknowledge that's a tax conversation. There is an impact to the property taxpayer when it comes to tax policy changes. The orange line on the bottom, so consistent with net assessed values coming down against a flat rate, if you have your current rate today, we would see tax burden coming down. What we're showing on that dotted orange line is for the referendum fund specifically, I should say, the operating referendum fund specifically. We would see really modest growth had property net tax reform not come in. At this target levy, the referendum impact for the property taxpayer goes up. In that first year, it gets to $744. And I think it could be the case that some folks might look at this and it would catch people's attention, understandably. But at risk of bearing the lead, it's the next slide after this one. Or really, it is this one. I think just the line's not coming through. Oh no, I'm sorry. It'll be on slide 17. What we're taking a look at here is the referendum impact on the total liability for median taxpayers. Keep in mind, your taxpayers pay property taxes to the school district, but they also pay taxes to the county, to the township, and the library system, and for most of them to the city. That's all layered into their overall property tax rate and property tax burden. It's this slide right here that I think really tells the story most directly for your school district. So what we're looking at in the kind of blue line across the bottom, that teal line across the bottom, is where property tax bills are most likely headed at the consistent referendum rate based on property tax reform. The dotted orange line is where the taxpayer's overall bill would be without property tax reform. And that navy line is what this proposal would do to the property tax bill. Stated otherwise, that blue line and the dotted orange line run almost perfectly in parallel from 2027 onward. And so I think the conversation with the community, if this ends up being, kind of the rate and levy, program that the district pursues, I think the message to the community could be, this is asking the community to pay property taxes at the level that was already approved in the previous referendum. It's going to provide some additional funding to the school district, largely to offset those losses to the operations fund and then to pour into the additional programs that Dr. Atha has identified. But I think that connection between the dotted orange line and the navy line here is really one of the most important pieces for this school board as you consider your options.
And Matt, with that, I think this is where, for me, thinking about the state's role and our school board's role, we have an annual budgeting process that we go through every year, and that the local property taxpayers also have elected this board, right? So through that process, I think what we're saying with the local referendum is allow this board to really do their job. We have excellent schools because of this board and the standards they've set. And then also what we've set is kind of, this slide shows what we believe we need to continue excellence in our district. And that's, and it's really not, if the state legislators had stayed out of that, that's where we would be, and we wouldn't be asking for another referendum.
Yeah, so we anticipate around the state this year, we're going to see somewhere at 40 some odd referendum. Maybe we'll get up to 50. Keep in mind, 290 school districts around the state. A normal referendum cycle is 5 or so. Now, I will say, it's got to be in the fall of the even number years now, so we are seeing them kind of more bunched together. But the volume of referenda we anticipate seeing this fall is a reflection of exactly that conversation. The referendum is, I would say, as close as a community gets to local control around its school district's funding. And there's voter participation in it, and it's the one piece that really works that way.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to note in 2010 when Westfield, Washington passed their first referendum, it was in the November election, even year. We renewed, it was 23 cents. November of 2016, again, we went in November, even number year. Lowered it to 20, then in November of 22, an even number year, we lowered it 3 more cents. And so trying to be very prudent, very fiscally conservative, as we knew we were a growing community, but then at the same time, changes in legislation have, and then our growth. We also, I think, our overall tax rate, we dropped 80 cents is where then we stayed pretty consistent since the last referendum, but up into that, over the 5 or 6 years, we had dropped our tax rate 80 cents, even with some of the new construction we've had. So again, what the frustration, I think, for me, I've lived in Westfield for almost 16 years, so I voted for all those referendums and supported the school, is that as we've tried to be conservative, this is not an efficiency issue for us, it's a revenue issue. We've done what we'll always continue to look at efficiency and run our operations efficient, but this is simply a revenue problem that we have.
So I've got just a little bit more content prepared around some things that the district may consider when it comes to assessed value. And then just a little bit, I want to talk about the ballot question, because there is an aspect or two that's unique. That's challenging for school districts everywhere, but I think we really need to highlight in your case just to make sure we understand what the district's preparing for. So we've modeled the levy that could be generated or the rate that would be required. We've looked at it in both directions based upon different assumptions and net assessed value. We have factored in, so we saw that kind of declining net assessed value over a period of years. It's between 1% and 2% over the next 5 years. We've demonstrated here at a fixed tax rate, at that target tax rate, how much revenue could be collected. Well, in this case, we're displaying what the net assessed value would be, and then it's going to be the revenue that can be collected if the district is above or below by 2% relative to what we're projecting today. So as Greg mentioned, I mean, for all the data we have and for all the ways that we can dig into this, I do think it's important to acknowledge if we're trying to look 6 years out, 8 years out, there's a pretty good chance that what we assume assessed value is today, it could look different from that 6 years or 8 years from now. Under the kind of more optimistic scenario, we see you by the end of this current referendum getting up potentially to $10.4 billion in net assessed value. At the maybe more pessimistic side, 7.5. The baseline assumption is that you'll be in that $8.8 million net assessed value 8 years from now. So keep in mind again that kind of fraction equation is the levy in the numerator and the assessed value in the denominator. If the assessed value performs better, the school district, I think, at that point has options that it could consider. It could be that you're in a position where you need the revenue and you collect the revenue. It could be that you take a lower tax rate. You don't have to go to the maximum tax rate. And in fact, built into the plan, as Dr. Atha was indicating earlier, is we're going to show in this moment, you'll have to go with the maximum tax rate you anticipate collecting over the life of the referendum. That doesn't mean you take the tax rate in the first year, and our assumption is that you won't. The board will adopt a budget each year in September or October that reflects the rate that you intend to take that year, and that'll be your operating referendum rate for the year. But we've demonstrated here, if assessed value does better than projected, these have flipped. This blue line on the bottom shows you could get by with a lower tax rate. On the flip side, and here's where there's a degree of risk for the school district, for any school district, if assessed value does worse than we've projected, this is the tax rate that would be required to collect that same revenue. If the district opts to move forward with the referendum this year, you're going to put a maximum tax rate in that ballot question, and you'll be capped at that. So if we persistently underperform on assessed value, it's possible you're not going to be able to collect the levy that you otherwise would like to collect, just because the tax base hasn't kept up. There's a degree of uncertainty, especially because we've never, or at least not in a long time, been in this declining net assessed value situation. But I throw this out here just for the board's consideration. The default that we're assuming is that blue line, which would have a maximum tax rate of 43 cents to generate the levy that we've kind of put in place as a target. If you're nervous about that, you could consider going higher. If you, for other reasons, want to go lower, really these are the factors that you could consider there.
So this is a great point to say, because we made a lot of assumptions. So in that 39, so on the blue line, on the lower, the plus 2% baseline, 39.41 or 39 cents, just over 39 cents. And our estimation would be as low as we wanted to go. And that would put us at risk on something. Now, we wouldn't have to set it at that every year in the annual process.
Right.
But in that year, with the assumptions. So, however, if things don't go that way and we needed 47, right, like we're 8 cents difference at that point.
Right. It has some parallels to where we are today with that fixed operating referendum rate, because it's the same thing. A district will be capped at the rate that's approved by the voters. And there's a gap, of course, between 17 cents and, say, 39 cents in this case. But if you needed 47, that's exactly right. You'd be generating less revenue for the district than we would have forecasted today and that you arguably need.
So the structure of the referendum would be for an 8-year ask. We could shorten that, or we could expand that, or what's the science behind asking
Well,
or planning for 8 years?
sure. So the maximum in state law is 8 years.
Okay.
Most districts, the vast majority of districts that go for a referendum, go for an 8-year referendum. I am aware of one around the state that I anticipate going for a shorter one, but they may be the only one. In many districts, in at least half the districts, I would say, they're pursuing a rate and they anticipate implementing that rate each year. So if it was a 40-cent rate, they're saying voters, we're asking you to approve this, and then we're going to adopt that and put it in place in 2027. In your case, because of how much we see assessed value going down, you could pursue that. It would potentially generate more revenue than you need, but also be an impact on the taxpayer in that first year. So we also have districts like yours, and I think like you'll probably find with a lot of your suburban peers that are doing this kind of graduated approach, where again, you have the option to set it each year at the rate that you're comfortable with, that the community is comfortable with, but it doesn't have to be at that maximum.
And when you say that structurally, the ballot would read, if we just go by the midline, that we're asking for 8 years at 43.42.
Right.
However, each year we will, in our budget adoption, set the rate not to exceed that. So in this chart, our year one of the hopefully newly adopted referendum, 43.42 cents, we could say this budget year, we're only asking for 35.24.
Right. The ballot, yes, the ballot question is going to be a challenge because the ballot question is going to list both a maximum levy and a maximum tax rate. And so you'll have to list the maximum you anticipate over the life of the referendum. Certainly there are school boards and school districts that are very publicly saying this is what we're going to do over time. Not suggesting this is the course you need to take. There are even school boards or school districts that adopt a resolution indicating at the time they go through the referendum process in the first year, this is what we anticipate, adopting when we adopt our budget in the fall. So there are, districts that are pursuing kind of local control mechanisms for that, but the ballot question, to your point, is going to be that maximum rate.
Yeah.
I also want to, just in year one for us, and this would be Greg's job, but talking high level, we set a rate last time and felt really good what that rate would generate and our reserves and our ability to add programs that we still haven't added, and again, highly trained school resource officers. So we would set that rate as high as we needed to, not only to cover that first year, but to also rebuild some of those reserves, because we had those and we blew through them in just a couple years because of the artificial caps the state put on us afterwards. And so to some degree, we have to figure out. Now, again, I think Dr. Hunt would talk about that in the annual budgeting process. We're not saying we would take it just because we could. We would take it and he would show justified. This is what we need for the operations. Here's what we need. We have a board policy for what our target reserve should be. We're not going to be more than those target reserves, but we need to have those reserves. And we need to work towards those. And then we'd also work, this is where we have worked with policy analytics prior to this, because we do want to know the impact on our taxpayers. So as every year as Greg sets that budget, he works with them so that we do know the impact on the different parcels in our community. And we try to be, again, prudent and understand that this has an impact on our taxpayers.
So I actually have a ballot question slide here in just a moment that I do think it's worth us spending a moment on. Just this one last piece. And this actually is relevant for the ballot question conversation we're getting ready to have. What we're forecasting here is at that kind of target tax rate, the amount of levy that could be generated if the assessed value is, again, 2% higher or 2% lower. I point out this slide in particular because the school district, or any school district that goes through a referendum effort, has to put two different metrics on the ballot question. One is the tax rate, and one is the maximum levy that you anticipate over the life of the referendum. So even if we set the rate at a level, to Dr. Atha's point from just a moment ago, even if we set the rate to the level that we think is going to generate the levy that you'll need 8 years out from now, 6 years out from now, if assessed value does better than that, and the maximum levy's been set at a certain level, you still may find yourself capped, toward the end of an operating referendum. Not as likely because we anticipate assessed values going down if we're looking for silver linings, but that's one of there is no perfect answer for that. It's one of the kind of challenges that districts have to contemplate.
And I do want to note again, I don't think I was clear. That initial jump that you see on the graph, and then it stays pretty steady as we increase, is because of the impact of the artificial caps, the hit to our reserves, and the gap that we have in operating because of that. And so we are trying to make that up in year one. That's why you see that jump. And we do want to put in place, again, I haven't even mentioned that our school counseling ratio to students, we have never been able to address. That was something that we're going to address. We didn't do it in the first year. We have not addressed, again, that's an area where pay is trending 10% behind market. And to me, that is a school safety issue, right? It's really hard to know what student supports you need in place when you're not even hitting the recommended student to school counselor ratio. Because if you would do that, the support our kiddos would get on a daily basis would improve. And then we could say, okay, beyond that, whether it be social workers. The other thing I want, we have an agreement with Riverview Health that is, we would not survive without, that has school nurses, also has our athletic trainers, and then they also give us revenue for naming rights. As we grow, we do not have our additional school nurses and things built into that agreement. And so we have to, there's that piece there, which is the safety and health of our students that is paramount in the next couple of years that we have to address. One of the things with our school resource officers in our city growing at the same time, it's been very difficult for them to have the road officers they need, and we appreciate their support with the school resource officers, but both of us are kind of behind the growth because of the impact on local finances with state legislation.
Okay, so I do want to spend just a moment on the ballot question, and assuming that the district opts to move forward, ultimately, legal counsel will help you with the actual framing of the question. But there's a few parameters that I think are worth any district administration and board considering as you prepare to go through a ballot question. The ballot question has evolved over time, and this community has been through more than one referendum, so you've seen the various versions of that ballot question over time. The last time you ran it in 2022, if I'm thinking of it correctly, it was probably that kind of percentage-based one where it said a home at this, home will see an increase at this percentage level and a business at this percentage level. That version of it's gone. What we have now is shall this particular school corporation increase property taxes for this particular purpose, and you'll define what that purpose is. At a property tax rate that does not exceed, so that's one of the two metrics that the school district's going to fill out. So we've assumed 43 cents here, but you could set it at whatever makes sense for the school district. You could go slightly higher if you're wanting to protect, against assessed values not performing as well. You could set slightly lower if you had cause to do so. But the rate's one of the two pieces that you'll generate. And then the other one is, and results in a maximum annual amount that does not exceed blank. So that's that other piece where you'll be called upon to supply a levy amount that you want to include on the ballot question that your voters are going to take a look at. So then beyond that, there's some nuances to the question that are going to feel new that I think just we need to discuss so we can kind of take a first look at what that is. The median homestead assessed value, at least in the way that we calculate it here in Westfield, is about $427,000. That's if we lined up every homestead in the school community and picked the one that was right in the middle, $427,000 is the market value of that property. The ballot question is going to take the median homestead and round it up to the closest $50,000. So if we got that exactly on the nose, the ballot question is going to say $450,000. So that's kind of one piece to understand. What the ballot question is going to say is the property tax bill due to this referendum will increase by a certain dollar amount attributable to the referendum. And the way that's going to be calculated is it's going to take that $450,000. It's going to apply, homestead deductions to it, and then it's going to multiply it by the maximum tax rate that this board adopts. So that's even if the plan is to have a lower tax rate in those early years, it's going to take that maximum tax rate times the assessed value. I'll layer on top of that that your taxpayers are already paying operating referendum taxes today. There's no subtraction for operating referendum taxes being paid. It's just this is the amount of operating referendum dollars that would be paid at the maximum tax rate against that median assessed value, rounded up to the nearest $50,000. So that's all to say, potentially what your ballot question is going to say is what we got in this kind of bottom part of the blue box, $961. That's dependent upon the actual tax rate that you set. That's dependent on $450,000 actually being the number. We've been engaged with county auditors around the state, and we've even talked with the county auditor here in Hamilton County. There's a couple different ways that median can be calculated. I don't think anything is going to drop you below $400,000. Like I don't think you're going to change that much, but we are seeing some county auditors come up with median residential values that are a little bit lower than what we've calculated. I don't think it changes your ballot question, but that's out there at least. So it's kind of a lot to digest, but I point that out. Every time we get a new ballot question, there's new nuances to it, new ways that boards and districts are responsible for communicating it to the community. This is what we think yours could potentially look like.
And earlier in your chart, you had a breakdown of the homesteads. So clearly, less than half our homes are below that, obviously. And so this question is misleading because the majority of our property owners will not see, even if we took the maximum tax rate, would not see this increase.
Right, and agreed. And I'll pair with that and say, if you stick to exactly the tax rate schedule that you've laid out and identified, there would be no years where it gets up to that amount for your median taxpayer, like even toward the end of the referendum. So, a higher value home pays more, but the median taxpayer, we really don't think would ever get to that level as long as the district stuck to that tax rate schedule. So, ultimately, like I mentioned, it's going to be important for any district to, consult with legal counsel and to go through the processes. You'll also need to engage with the county auditor when you prepare to formulate the ballot question, if you get on that path, and have them identify what the median assessed value is. I happen to know in Hamilton County they're working through that process. We've talked with many county auditors around the state who are doing the same right now.
And we will ask at the May meeting for permission from the board for us to engage with the county auditor, so Dr. Hunt can engage with them to get that information, and we can begin to prepare and look at these numbers so that we have an accurate picture of our homesteads.
So the $961, is it fair to say, and if I'm tracking all of this, you have, let's just say the 17 cents right now is a $200 tax bill, or the referendum dollars is $200,
It's probably,
and then you get a $300 credit. So really the increase is $461 to the average taxpayer on their net bill, or is that?
Yeah, I see
kind
the
of
argument.
commingling things?
I would struggle to go quite that far
Okay.
because the taxpayer still has other non-referendum taxes that, as their home value goes up and they're capped at 1%, that portion of it goes up as well. What we do know is your median taxpayer in 2026 is paying roughly the same amount that they paid in 2025. Your median taxpayer's bill was basically the same year over year. That difference is attributable to the $300. So without the $300, their bill would have been $300 higher. I hesitate a little bit to also layer that on in 2027 at risk of double counting the 300, but I do think your overall point stands that there's tax relief the taxpayer is seeing today.
So it would also, I guess along the same lines, maybe I'm just asking the same question, but so if Westfield Washington Schools does nothing, my average home tax bill, let's say in 2027, will be lower than what it would have been before SEA 1
Yes, the answer to that's definitely yes.
by a
Well,
decent amount.
It will be. We've measured that. So the numbers are not showing up on the bottom, but
Right.
in 2020, 2026, which is the number, that's number 2 here, it's about $300 difference. In 2027, which is the year after, we're getting, close to $400 difference.
Right.
That's attributable to that $300 credit and then declining net assessed values.
So with SCA1 and with no action from Westfield Washington Schools, my, let's say 2027 property taxes will be lower than what they would have been if there were no SCA1.
Yes.
And then if we do take action and we go with this, I'll call it the baseline amount, whatever it is. My perception is my 2027 property taxes will be roughly the same as what they would have been without SCA1 and without this new action, meaning if all things were the same, if I vote yes on this and there was no SCA, am I about where I would have been had there been no SCA1?
Yes, that's what we anticipate, is essentially if it's at exactly this tax rate, and you're right, we hold all things equal.
Right.
Yes, the answer is the taxpayer would go back to roughly where they would have been without SCA1. It's almost dollar for dollar, how that blue line and dotted orange line up here.
That was gonna be my question. So basically, if you assume you never got the $300 credit that we talked about earlier, then we're just right where we were. So there was no point.
It's the $300 credit plus the new referendum amount
Right.
under this scenario.
And
So
is it just a matter of, instead of sending it to the state all in, you're really then able to shift more of it to your community, specifically to the school? So in effect, Senate Enrolled Act just gave more voice to the tax unit that needs the more, or
Well-
asks for more money in the community?
I think-
My perception is instead of the homeowner keeping the money that they get from the benefits of SCA1, they're just gonna give that gain back to the school that would have got that gain had there been no SCA1.
That's essentially what you're asking, is for the taxpayer, in this scenario, that was what you would be asking for, is for the voter to approve taxes going back to where they would have been. I do want to acknowledge, and this starts to get a little technical, there's a shift where the school district collects a little bigger piece of it, because that $300 credit, the school district loses most of that, but the city loses a piece and the county loses a piece. On the referendum rate, that all goes to the school district. So the taxpayer pays the same as they would have paid without SCA1. Of the dollars they pay, modestly higher portion of it goes to the school district.
Again, I do want to, going back to the school resource officers and our police department, we would, in this, take on more of the cost of school resource officers with the hope then of freeing up their budget that they currently have dedicated to school resource officers, so then they could put more road officers on. So it is a collaboration and working together. This is what Mayor Wills and I've talked about, and Chief Keen, is that it's a win-win for the community. So in essence, that piece right there, even though we get a few more modest increase because of those referendum dollars, the city will benefit in that area because they do help us out immensely with school resource officers currently. And we still only have them in half our schools.
In this referendum, if it passes, we'll put resource officers in every building or every school.
Yes, we'll have, the plan right now, and Mike Hall is working on that, is that we would have a school resource officer for every school, and then 2 extra, so then on days off, we are always covered. They would be highly trained. We'd go through the National School Resource Officer and get them trained. We have not been able to do that either, again, because of resources. We have a curriculum. Actually, what we want to do is integrate them into each school, so they are school resource officers as well as educators. And so there are things they would be integrated into that community. And right now, because we have to be efficient with the city, they also have other responsibilities. And so at times they have to leave and go help out because of emergency situation. Many of them have to do traffic control. And so they would be full-time school resource officers working for us, working for the schools. And then in the summertime, they would go back, right now is what we're talking about, and work for 2 months with the city, but then come back to us during the school year.
So during the summer, when things get a little bit busy around Grand Park and everything else, there'll be regular police officers
Yep.
helping
then
out the city
that
and
will
everything
also-
else.
yeah. Also be time for them then to do some of that training as well in the summertime.
Yeah.
It's a great collaboration. You know, both Noblesville and Carmel have safety referendums. And so we never did that. Again, we thought we were going to be able to do it this last referendum just with our net assessed evaluation growth, but we're just kind of including that in this referendum. That's a piece of the programming that with these this extra revenue that we will implement.
So that's largely the content that we've prepared. I mean, we've already hit this next piece an awful lot this evening. Really, school districts have two choices if they've been impacted by property tax reform, as everybody has, and as you have too. It's, you know, you have to look at your operations, and you all have done that most certainly. And if you want to look at the revenue side, and operating referendums are one option to do that. And then, like we mentioned earlier, and as you guys have a pattern of doing, it is worth noting that there are fewer options for referenda, and so it would have been the case in the past. If 2026 wasn't the right year, we could have a conversation about 2027, even a couple times in 2027, spring or fall. At this point, it's, you know, fall of 26 or fall of 28 or fall of 2030.
Matt, can you go back one slide? This really is the two choices, and I would even offer that the left choice is a choice for excellence. It's the path of excellence. The right choice is mediocrity, and sometimes that's imperceptible. You try to say, hey, we got to do more with less, and you have amazing educators who step up and get it done, but there's a cost to that, and that cost is usually in our mission and our ability to educate kids to the level that we do. And then you wake up 5 years down the road and you've become mediocre because you fell for that, if you will. And so listen, Greg and I have been preparing to talk to you about this for a couple months. We don't want to do this, right? This hasn't been fun for us, and headed into nowhere. We don't want to be sitting here talking about this. But the reality is, we value our educators, this district, what it means to this community, and this is the only path forward, in our opinion.
And our ideal timeline is this November, right? Because we've already, and I think even those last couple of years of shortfalls proven your point that this is the right path to go, because we've already eaten into our reserves with just the unforeseen reductions prior to Senate bill, let alone it coming online. And you'd hate to think where we'd be then if we waited until the 28 election, right? So hopefully there's enough time to.
So the majority of what we do, not trying to oversimplify, we are funded by state funding and local funding. So state funding is pretty much the education fund, local funding, but the role of a district is we receive those tax dollars to educate kids. And the way you educate kids, so those revenues come in and you spend them mostly on salaries. And the best way to keep kids safe and the best way to partner with parents to educate them, to prepare them for the future, is to surround them by caring adults. What Senate Enrolled Act 1 has done is said, you will have fewer caring adults per student going forward if you do nothing. So you will have to do more with less. But what we do, we are a people-driven industry. We are an educator-driven, and so we will have fewer educators per student. We will have to run fewer bus routes. We'll have to figure all of that out. I believe with, as I look at our revenue in this issue, we have to go this November, or we'll have to go immediately to the right side of that, the circle on the right side immediately.
Yeah, to your point, it would be, again, if we didn't go out here in '26, then we're gonna start eating into our reserves even more so than what we've already done. And so that's why it is imperative for us to go out in '26. And I'm just going to, I know this has been said tonight, but I can't stress it enough. The thing that we need to look at, and I know it's been in the past, it's rate. We have to look at what the levy is. So what levy do we need to have in order to implement the different programs that we want to have, making sure that we are working efficiently within the district based upon that levy, then that rate can be set. But that's a different mindset. That's a paradigm shift than what we have been focusing on in the past, and that's something that we just need to keep in mind in moving forward.
So the timeline is, in the May meeting, we will have ask the board for authorization to engage with our local auditor, and then if we're going in November 26th, the board has to adopt a resolution before July 1. So we can talk about that at the May board meeting, next steps.
Makes sense.
Any other questions for Matt while we have him here?
No, I just want to thank Chris Sluter, who's in the crowd behind us here. Do you have any questions? He's good. He's the teachers union, classroom teachers union, so we appreciate him showing up and listening to us.
All righty, with that, I think we can transition. We have Brent Height from CSO who's just going to give us a quick update on the high school project. So just a couple minutes. I think if you need to take a quick break, you can, but we'll get things switched over and we'll be ready to roll. So we have our friends from CSO here who can give us an update on a lot of things going on, but the focus is the high school project and a few other things that we talked about. So we'll just jump right in, Brent, if that's okay, and Stephanie.
Yeah, thanks, John. Thanks for. Okay, there we go. Thank you guys for having us tonight. Excited to be here and kind of share with you what we've been working on for, I guess, nearly 6 months now since the master plan went through and kind of the first projects out the gate as we move things along. So as John mentioned, we're going to start at the high school. We'll talk a little bit about the Monon Athletic Campus, some baseball fields at Shamrock Springs, and then kind of look forward to see what's on deck and coming next. So. Starting out with Westfield High School. So we, a year and a half ago, you guys kind of hit reset on the current high school project and said, hey, we need to take a step back, look at the bigger picture and make sure we're making the right moves. So we've been kind of in that process, as well as trying to push a few things forward quickly so that we can make some progress on some of the critical needs at the high school. So right now, we're looking at updating existing restrooms, classrooms, HVAC systems, roofing, kind of just existing maintenance items that need to be taken care of, as well as starting to look at capacity for so expanding classrooms, expanding parking, and all kind of the support infrastructure for the major high school, supporting growing programs like PE, athletics, performing arts, and making sure that we're aligning our current projects with future improvements that are kind of on the docket to be made. So right now, there's been $100 million essentially allocated for this first project at the high school. We have currently split it into 4 packages, which you can see there on the right table. The first of those you guys have already approved. It was the chiller replacement. The chiller has been ordered. It keeps getting delayed on terms of delivery, but it's supposed to be installed this summer. And so that'll be the first project out the gate. The next one is interior renovations and roofing replacement. So that is going out Friday to bid with Myron Agem, our construction management partner. And that mainly is touching a lot of the interior spaces in the high school that didn't get touched in 2017 project. So it's a lot of finish updates, carpet, lighting, paint, just trying to bring that whole high school up to the same level. So all the teachers are teaching in the same spaces, students are experiencing the same spaces, and it feels like one high school. In addition to that, we've got a mechanical systems upgrade allocated for package 3. That'll go out this summer. That's a not sexy project. It's only in the main mechanical room. We're looking at the hot and cold water systems that support the chillers and boilers and the kind of what keeps the building hot and cold. So that plant is 30 years old and is due for a replacement. So we've been working with Brian Kelly on that. And then the last one there is kind of the big piece, the additions and renovations and site improvements. So that's scheduled to go out in October. I'll share the bulk of that information with you here shortly. Just one quick note, we just reached our schematic design milestone on Friday of last week. So we packaged together a set of documents to Myron Agem, who will now be going through that and putting a cost estimate together. And then they'll come back and bring that to us, and we'll be able to kind of evaluate our next steps forward in terms of making sure we're staying on track and on budget from that point forward. So as I mentioned, this is just a quick look at what those interior renovations in package 2 look like. So the orange or yellow areas you're seeing here are the areas impacted by these renovations. So again, mainly classrooms, hallways, and restrooms that haven't been updated since the original building was built. And then we're also doing some work in the MPIF, updating the flooring there that needs replacement. It's kind of at the end of its life and starting to crack in places, and just giving a little bit of a cosmetic refresh while we're in there. Second floor, much the same, classrooms, hallways, and restrooms that we're updating finishes. The restrooms are also getting updated plumbing fixtures, the piping, all of that stuff, just to make sure everything will continue to function well as we go forward. Moving beyond package 2, so this is, call it a site master plan.
You got to look at it for a second. He squared it up. It's actually pretty cool.
Right, so north
yeah.
is to the right, 31 is at the top, but this allowed me to make it bigger in your screen so it's a little more legible. The orange areas you can see are potential or proposed expansions to the main high school building. And then you can see a lot of gray areas that are new or expanded parking areas. One of the big moves that we're planning to make is to move Shamrock Alley from behind the building, between the building and the stadium, to between the stadium and 31. So that's really going to allow us to create what I jokingly call, and maybe it'll stick, the Rockway, a pedestrian path between the stadium and the high school that will serve as kind of an outdoor connection for the campus, because all of our parking for students is going to be on the north end. And at some point, when we bring the middle school on as part of the high school campus, we're going to need a way to move kids north and south. On an adverse weather day, I'm certain they're going to cut through the building, and that's what I did in college, so I'm sure that's what students will do here as well. But I think on a nice day, or if people feel it's too crowded and they want to go outside, we want to give them that opportunity. So We're really kind of excited about that piece, and I think it's let the high school admin team really start to think about their school as a campus rather than just a building. From there, a couple other things I'll point out, and we'll look at.
Laser was working on that screen. There
Yeah.
we go.
So you see the athletic addition down here, which we'll go into more detail. That's primarily looking at football locker room, some other athletic support spaces, training space. There's a golf lab, golf training space, and then a multi-purpose area. You'll see on the end here this yellow dashed and this parking lot. That is intended, as we're planning out, that's where the new competition gym would sit. So we're trying to plan roughly what that is sized for so that whatever we're building today will integrate well with whatever we build in the future. So we want to make sure that the floor heights match and that the building massing looks good and architecturally it all fits. So we're trying to design it a little bit now just to make sure what we're doing today makes sense. And then on the other side of the building, the south end, you see the academic addition here. So that just really extends off Shamrock Hallway. And you'll see that layout. It's very similar to the addition we did in 2017. The last addition is the band and performing arts. This one is still a little bit in question as we continue to explore what will happen with the middle school campus and what programs may live there. But as right now, we wanted to make sure we have the flexibility to maybe do it either way. So we're showing where that may land on this side. I think it is at this point fairly good consensus that the auditorium is likely going to move across the street for a new facility instead of extending the stage like was originally planned to just create that new facility and then reutilize that footprint of the current auditorium for something else. So all of those things are yet to be determined, but things we've been in kind of deep discussions about. The last thing I'll highlight here, you can see on the front of the building, the bus parking lot and the visitor teacher parking lot. So those have flipped kind of from where they sit today. Part of that is because we wanted to bring the bus parking lot to what will be kind of the new center of campus, which will be Hoover. So if everybody's exiting in that parking lot now, they can separate either into the current high school or they might go up into the middle school or South Campus, as we've been referring to it later. And then moving more of the vehicular parking closer to the front door, which makes a little more sense logically, something they struggle with a little bit today. Yeah.
So this event parking, I guess it's the south, yeah, which is a currently practice field. Would it not make more sense to put one of the turf practice fields up there and then move that parking down there?
Yeah, there's a couple different things there. So the red line you see there that Amber mentioned is the marathon pipeline that we have to be. Oh, whoa! I'm jumping way. All right. And we're done.
And we're off.
I hit the wrong button. There we go. All right. Sorry about that. So yeah, we actually have had some of this discussion today. It may, right now, athletics has kind of pointed to wanting the fields to the north based off the proximity to all of the other athletic components, locker room spaces, et cetera, being on the north end of the building. And those will primarily be practice fields. So that's kind of the current thought process. We talked today, depending on where performing arts is and if marching band is using one of those fields, maybe you would put one north and one south.
That's what I was thinking.
And so it's not a fixed plan yet. I think as some of those pieces become a little more final, we'll make that decision. And I think there's still some discussion to be had with Andrew about whether the marching band prefers to march on a turf field or on a parking lot.
That's a good point.
And so here, the parking lot gives us a little more versatility in terms of staff parking during the day and other things. But obviously a turf field is kind of more of an example of what they're going to march on later. So we'll continue to have that conversation, and I think some of it may be driven about where marching band and performing arts land ultimately, because right now there is the band parking lot on South Campus or at the middle school. So if band were to move there, we may just continue to utilize that space for that.
Could we just strike the busing parking lot expansion there as part of the band thing? And if buses are the only ones gonna be using it, and then
We-
after school, close it off.
Yeah, we actually do that quite a bit. I don't know that we'll make a lot of friends of your neighbors, putting the band up front. But, yeah, certainly something that we can take a look at.
The other thing, Bill, is as the coaches and Andy have talked about how they want to spread out practice-wise, they, I think, have landed on having the two fields together as opposed to spread across campus, because we need to remember this is kind of the new standard to support what's going on at the football stadium.
Right.
Relocating soccer and the baseball fields off, so then, again, the proximity to the locker room centrally located, and then spreading adults out or having, the coaches together. I think they like the two closer is the piece they like. And then, again, we've had a lot of conversation on Shamrock Station and parking, and so we like parking on that end of the building, because clearly we're gonna have plenty of parking north of the building. We're gonna have very little parking on that end, so even on football night, you can see where that parking lot could be used for the football field, where if it's a turf field, that parking lot gets relocated to the north end. And so it's just kind of the balance, I think, that we're.
Now, can that event parking lot, can it not be used for student parking or staff parking?
Probably be more staff.
Yeah. Yeah, we've talked about it primarily for staff, and I think Andrew, when he's talked, he's like, if it were the band practice facility, we would certainly want it to be staff, because they're much more trustworthy than students to move their cars by the time they need to move their cars. So, go ahead. Here, yes. So we're still planning for a small outbuilding on the south end of the field. This will primarily create a south entrance to the stadium, as well as do visitor restrooms and concessions to serve that side of the field. And that way we can separate home and visitor a little bit. That's one of the concerns that Andy has had in terms of how visiting locker room space versus home locker room space versus spectators, trying to keep all of that traffic a little separate so that there's never an incident on a Friday night that maybe something a little heated happens on the field. So that building will also have a small locker room for visitors to use that will double and be used for track during the track season. So it's a much smaller footprint than what we've talked about previously, likely a 3 seasons building that's only operational during, spring, summer, and fall, and drained down during the winter. So I think the last thing I'll point out, I mentioned the pipeline. You can kind of see how our access road is following that. Marathon likes to put asphalt over the pipeline. That's their preferred method. As we come down here, you can see our proposed footprint of that future competition gym is going to overlap that pipeline. And so we've already engaged Marathon in some early conversations about what it might take to relocate a piece of that so that we can get it around our future building expansion. So we're going to explore that option, talk about what the cost implications are, and then ultimately decide if we think that's the best use of our dollars, or do we need to explore a different location for that gym to sit so that it's not a problem? Or do we modify the footprint of that gym somehow so that maybe it still works with the area we have?
Can I ask a question? The turf practice field size, is that a full, or is it like 2 halves?
Full field, so it's 120 yards, yeah, full end zone, and so it'd be very similar to the Noblesville new stadium, where they have the 2 practice fields and the stadium kind of all right together. So that's kind of the new, call it the new standards in the arm race of football. That's, so, and as I've gotten to know, you have over 200 kids in your football program, so I can certainly see the need for multiple fields.
So if you don't know, on the north side, they have
yeah.
an indoor facility, 2 turf fields. I guess it's kind of west of that facility.
Yeah, they're tucked back in there, so if you didn't know they were there.
And Brownsburg has 2 as well.
Yeah.
Well, so that was gonna lead to my next question. So would we entertain looking into enclosing one of those? Like Carmel recently did?
Carmel actually has 3.
Yeah, if you count the enclosed one, it's 3.
Like for the, well, you said baseball's going away, so does this calculate baseball? Baseball is somewhere,
Baseball will be relocating off-site.
no, No, but this map shows like baseball was here. Like, where is baseball on this map?
Yeah, so the soccer field used to sit here,
Okay.
then softball, and then baseball. Yeah, the old tennis.
And then that's just drivers unit, drivers engine.
Yeah, so we tried to leave a little space knowing that we've still got to study the detention and how much we go underground versus how much we have above ground space. And we may be able to continue to parking, up into these corners too, depending on what our numbers come back to. So we'll be kind of strategic about that as we're looking at it as the design develops and we get our civil engineer a little more engaged on the drainage side of it. We are going to master plan, I think, all of the drainage for the site so that we can incrementally do it, or we have the ability to, we're trying not to front load too much because we don't want to spend a bunch of money on parking lots and not get the building expansions we need, so we're trying to make sure we're doing it the right way. Yeah.
So enclosing it.
The last,
So in closing one of those fields, we can certainly look at that. I don't know that we've got the budget for that. Mr. Hunt may advise me on that one.
Well, if we're gonna do north and south campus, do we really need that much student parking on the back side of the building? Or could we allow students to also park on south campus?
Yeah, I think we would plan for students to park on both sides. I don't know if, we haven't really talked with the high school team about how they want to supervise and administer that, or even on the south end of the current middle school, there's parking on that side, but I would think that primarily staff, you wouldn't want students that far away.
yeah, I think we can, yep.
So if there is no, I guess, new event gym or whatever, that's just parking as shown here. With the parking you're showing here, is that an increase in parking from today's?
Yes, it's almost double the parking spots you have today. And that doesn't count, we'll likely cross-stripe the bus parking lot so that for an event similar today, but maybe a little more logical than today, so that people know how to do it. Can use that during events. So, all right, well, I'll keep going. We can certainly come back. So then looking at the floor plan, this is just a quick overall. I will zoom into each of these areas so you can get a better look. But again, south end, this is the academic edition. Today, this is the front door. So the stadium's back here. And then this is the athletic edition kind of on this side. And you'll see kind of through this area, this is the existing cafeteria. We're proposing some pretty significant renovations through here, primarily to expand the cafeteria, as well as start to think about circulation in some of these areas as we've got, 4,000, 5,000 kids trying to circulate through this building. We need to make some larger hallways to circulate kids through, especially if we're thinking a lot of them are coming in on that north end and then down into distributing through the building. So like I said, we'll zoom in a little bit so you can see that better. And then second floor, again, so second floor of the academic on the south, and then second floor of the athletics on the north. So we're gonna start on the north end looking at athletics. It's a little washed out, but that red box here is essentially us kind of planning for that future expansion of the competition gym. Just so, we want you guys to know we're being mindful of the future. And then to give you oriented, so here's our weight room, MPIF, main gym, those are all existing spaces today. And then I'll zoom in one more time so it gets a little more clear. So here you can see kind of the existing weight room. So we're really kind of squaring off that existing area that's there today. And then we're creating these kind of larger circulation. Oh, I did it again. Got having fat finger problems. So here is that long connection corridor through here. And then we're also trying to create a second one along the MPIF so that there are two kind of major arterial ways through there. Item number one here, this would be the new football locker room. Right now we're accounting for 175 lockers in that space. The head coach's office and then restrooms, showers, and all the support they need. And then item 2 would be the freshman locker room over here on the to the left, which is just over another 100 lockers. And we've been pretty intentional about making sure that there's a logical progression in the design of those. What we've kind of heard from our coaches is we want kids to aspire to be in the varsity locker room. So that needs to be kind of the standard, and then the freshman locker should be a step below that so that kids are kind of aspiring to grow in the program. You can kind of see how those spaces kind of radiate off a hallway. So that kind of creates kind of a football zone, is I guess the best way to maybe term it, this hallway through here. And then these are some additional support spaces for football. So this is a large group instruction area with 250 seats in it currently, where they can gather as a full team, watch film, do team activities, and kind of build their culture there. Right in front of that, this item 3 here is the coaches' conference room. So it's a large conference space for about 20 people to fit in, so they can get all their coaches together at one time. The high school admin team also, as we've experienced through our design meetings, have a dire need for some conference space. We had a meeting in the upper gym while they played basketball downstairs. It was very interesting, but so that'll definitely be useful, not just for football. And there are a couple other, these item 11s here and here, some other small conference rooms. Those will be primarily not just for football, but for other athletic programs, for the athletic director to meet with coaches, recruiters, and other things like that. So they just needed some of that additional meeting space. Item 9 here is the coaches' locker room. So that's just kind of a shared locker space for coaches to be able to change or shower if they need to, or if you've got morning practices and need to get to go to your classroom to teach. Some space for that, that's separate from each of the head coaches' offices that are in each of the respective locker rooms. The next piece here is the training suite. So this is a significant upgrade from kind of what's current. This will serve all athletics. They asked us to kind of push it toward the outside of the building to have direct access out to the fields. It will have training beds, taping beds, an office space for the trainer, a restroom, a hydrotherapy area, a kind of plyometric mat lay down stretch area, storage with ice, coolers, as well as a space here on the back end for their carts or their golf carts or gators, so that if they're carrying ice and coolers or somebody gets hurt and needs to be brought back, they've got kind of a space to store that stuff. That 6 should be a 7. I apologize. So that would be the freshman weight room. Currently today, they're using the old weight room off the MPIF as kind of a freshman weight room with some very basic, simple equipment. And so they still need that space. And so we've tried to recreate that here with item 6. They really like the kind of proximity to the kind of major weight room. We've also seen some of our other districts, and I kind of talked about this a little bit too, like sometimes like a girls only weightlifting class that is a little more comfortable in a smaller venue, or the big open area leans itself to some of those like yoga, plyometrics, and just different offerings. So it really kind of expands what they're able to do in their PE courses. I think I hit everything on that page. So let me go forward 1. So as we come east, so this is the main, again, that main hallway that connects down to the athletic addition. We're coming through, these are all existing locker rooms today. This hallway goes up to the main gym lobby today. And today, this is where the training room is, and there's some classrooms down on this end. So we're kind of blowing all of this area out to expand the cafeteria space. 3 is expanded serving area, and 2 is expanded kitchen. We have not yet met with the food service to talk about exactly what that looks like and how best to serve them, but that's certainly something on our agenda. And then there's some mechanical space, custodial building space and laundry, a custodial lounge space. As the building gets bigger, we're gonna have more of those services in this building, and so we wanna make sure we're providing for them. There's a new large restroom here right in the middle of the cafeteria. And what's nice about this now is as this hallway comes down, we're going to add another stair. This footprint is similar to the gathering stair in the student union on the south end, but some type of kind of gathering space there that'll connect first and second floor. So if you think if you're upstairs in Shamrock Hallway, you'll kind of spill out down into this area as well. So really creating a nice circulation space and connectivity for the whole building. I think all that. So I will say, as we go through SD and we get our budgets back, like this renovation here is, I think, a nice to have. It doesn't necessarily have to happen right now if our budget doesn't allow for it. So we're gonna have Meyer and Agent break up things into packages so we can kind of menu item and prioritize the things that we need to do most critically. Going up to the second floor, again, you can see our competition gym sitting over here with seating all around the outside. And then the upstairs are really two main large areas. The first, number one here, is golf training lab. So this is basically a kind of a simulation lab. We'll have 5 different swing bays and then a large putting and chipping green in the center. So that'll serve your golf students and golf teams as well as PE. There's a coach's office up there too. Again, trying to instill kind of that team area or that team culture within the space. And then item 2 there is a large multi-purpose space. So this would be similar in function to kind of the upper floor of the original locker room design that was proposed. So really just a large multi-purpose space that will be really used by performing arts at first until we get to the later phases of those performing arts projects. So we've kind of catered the dimensions of that space to what Winter Guard and percussion need inside that space to lay down their tarps and do their performances indoors. But then also looked forward at what this space may become. And right now, the thought process is this we'd likely move baseballs, batting cages over into this area so we could get 4 cages. Well, it'd be baseball and softball. We could get more cages and we might put turf down in that space so that they can kind of hit in that area as well. And then expand wrestling into baseball as we think about girls and boys wrestling, that program getting bigger and needing to take up more space. So that's kind of the long-term trajectory of that. So we're trying to plan for both. And then the last thing, you can kind of see there's a jagged line across the center there. Andy has asked us to look at if we can subdivide that space so that if need be, they could divide it in half and serve 2 purposes at the same time. There's still some logistics we gotta work through on how that works, but we'll certainly try to work in as much multifunction as we can.
And that's not, the lines of the gym are just to show how big it is.
Correct, yeah,
It's not going to be that.
no plan to have baskets or a wood floor or anything like that up here, just strictly to show kind of the scale of the space.
And would that also be for testing? Didn't we talk about
Mhm.
testing space?
Yeah, it certainly could be. So I can maybe show that here. So right now, the theory on the future gym expansion is that there will be an upper deck that spectators are only accessed on the upper deck and they walk down into their seats and they won't have access to the gym floor during a game. So then we're pushing all the concessions up so that you don't have to walk up a bunch of stairs with your hot dog and your popcorn and your drink and making a big mess. So that concession stand will eventually serve the main gym, but we'll likely just do kind of a shell build out for the time being. So.
Unless they need to add one, right?
That's right.
Right now, no, we're basically saying that you'll come in, you'll go upstairs, and then you'll walk down into your seats. Because, yeah, similar.
Or Newcastle.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, well, and that would be the biggest, I think it would be really cool to do it that way. I'm trying to think of who we looked at that had kind of did it that way. They're local too, I can't remember who it is, but there'd be a lot of dirt, right? So we'd likely end up paying more money to do it that way. But like be able to walk in at ground level and then down into your seat, that experience sounds really cool.
Southport?
That's what Carmel's is.
Yeah.
You walk in and you're
On the one side.
Yeah.
Here's the case you had to
That's right. Yeah, well, Carmel has grade change on their site, so on one side you walk in at grade and on the other side you go upstairs. So our site's very flat for the most part, so. Yeah, and then on the upper floor again, this is just that connection into Shamrock Hallway upstairs. And then kind of an expanded mechanical room there, so not anything too exciting on this side. think that, so before I go, any questions there before I go to the classroom expansion? So this is a little bit more straightforward. So this is the current entrance into the south end of the high school is here. That was part of the 2017 addition. And so we're really creating or redoing or replicating, that's the word I'm looking for, those classroom pods that we did in 17. I think they've worked really well for how the high school likes to do their instruction. And so what they've kind of told us is they want to just kind of repeat that on down the hall, or basically extend that hallway and repeat this. We are doing a few minor revisions based off just feedback on how they're using it. So you'll see that there's more of these kind of classrooms with the operable walls between them, instead of the operable walls to the collaboration common spaces. They found that teachers don't really use those as much as they do the one between rooms. So we're going to make that tweak to this version, and as well have reduced the number of kind of small group work areas in trade-off of making the common space larger. Those are somewhat of a supervision issue for them, so they want them to be a little more open, and then I think they use the larger spaces more frequently than they do the smaller. So that was just some feedback we were able to implement. There is a teacher workspace as well, but we have gone with a smaller version than what's in the current edition, as they've found that teachers generally use it more just for kind of a lunch or lounge setting, not so much for a work setting. They're using more of the common spaces for those work settings, which I think is great. They want to be around the kids and kind of help passive supervision. And then the last piece, so this will be the far south entrance. So we're showing kind of a small office suite here. We're still kind of talking through with the high school exactly how they're going to man and admin 2 buildings, multiple entrances, like how we do that operationally. So I don't know that that's the right number of offices, but we wanted the ability, if a student parks at South Campus and needs to walk in to the south end of North Campus to get to class after hours, doctor's appointment, what have you, the ability to check in and not have to walk all the way around the building to get to the front door to do that. And if anybody's spent time at the main high school entrance, it's a traffic log jam all day long. So as we grow, we need to have some different entrances to let kids in and out of the building. So planning for that, but haven't finalized.
Sorry, does any school allow kids to just fob in, like with a, you know?
We've had several conversations with a few areas. I think Cathedral was one of those. I'm trying to think who else we talked to.
Yeah, we did a project to learn a little more at Cathedral and Culver, which Culver's a very expansive campus, and they do geolocating. So with a student's phone, they can tell where students are and what time they've parked to what time they enter the building, and take attendance that way. And Cathedral does the fobs. So physical fob, phone fob, and I think a student ID fob. They've tried different pieces. And then they time the doors for passing periods and such. So several logistics to walk through there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be tricky if that sticks around in 5 more years or whenever this will take. Yeah.
Well, they just once they get in the classroom, they gotta put it up.
Yeah, they may have to put it up once they get in. Yeah, I'm not sure how that'll pan out. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, these guys here. Yeah, those are the small group rooms. So there's still, I think the pods or neighborhoods today have 4 small group rooms in each, so we're just reducing it down to 2. So, and then looking at the second floor, it's really just a duplicate of the first floor. We have created kind of another additional office down here. Again, not sure of functionality of that yet. We're still working through it. And then there is a smaller classroom down here. We're thinking that's for, as we've expanded the building, we have not expanded their basic BSD or kind of SPED push-in classroom, so trying to create one of those down on this end of the building as well.
Is this the hallway that expands a little without the lockers?
No.
No.
So, remember, as we've gone through this process with the high school, well, I guess, are there any other questions on the design? That's kind of the end of the design piece. Stephanie mentioned something. In the renovation package that's going out this week, we are taking lockers out of Shamrock Hallway. to try to create a little additional width there for circulation. The existing structure doesn't let us make it as big as I'd like to, but it'll at least help a little. So we'll get, I think, 15 inches on each side, so another almost 3 feet when we're done. Okay. So as we've gone through this master plan, we are being cognizant of kind of the future projects. So that first list there, the new auditorium and performing arts expansion, new competition gym, conversion of the middle school, those are all kind of projected out. But inevitably, we certainly have encountered some things that we didn't think about or weren't necessarily on the to-do list. So some of those are kind of exterior envelopes at the high school. So as we talk about windows, metal panels, roofing, all of those pieces are kind of coming end of life. And so as we're doing this process, we're trying to be mindful of that. So we are doing a roof replacement on the auditorium. We are replacing some of the EFIS panels, some of like the tan color that are on the outside. Some of those panels are dirty and some of them are leaking. So we're trying to be mindful of that. Windows, other things like that. So there's a cost to those things, and we're going to try to integrate as much as we can, but we may at some point need some additional funds to really finish that. Central plant and controls is another one of those. I mentioned this summer we're planning to start renovating like the boiler, chillers, those pieces. We never really had a mechanical cost for the whole central plant. We were carrying kind of just general cost. So that's something we're going to go ahead and integrate. Full site build out, we kind of package site cost into each project. But as we started planning this, like if you remember that site plan, we're kind of touching everything. I don't know that we ever anticipated that, so we'll have to see how that shakes out as we go along. And then high school athletic fields, we did budget for some of that. Depending on where the final location of those high school fields is, may depend on did we budget correctly. And so I just bring those to your attention. We do have flexibility in how Dr. Hunt and Stiefel and those guys have planned our bonds. We've got intent to, when projects finish and contingencies come back, to allocate those dollars back into other investments. And so we just want you to know that we're aware of those. We're seeing them, and then at some point we may come back and come to you guys and say, hey, we've got another project that we didn't talk about. Here's how we're funding it. Here's the scope of the work, and move forward from there. So I imagine we'll have more of those as we get into more buildings and more projects, but just to be aware of. I think that's the end of the high school presentation. Any other high school questions? Okay. So I'll move on to Monon Athletic Complex. So as you saw on the high school site plan, soccer's gone, lacrosse is gone, softball's gone, baseball's gone, tennis is gone, but we've already replaced that. So what are we going to do with those? Where are they going? So right now the current plan is to move them over to Monon. To do that, there are some enhancements that need to be made. So starting with item 1 here, we're going to improve the current and final remaining baseball field on this site. It'll become the high school varsity field, so we will be turfing, improving the dugouts, doing a tension net backstop, new scoreboard, lighting, all of those kind of infrastructure improvements for that field. We're going to add some amenities to one of the multi-purpose fields that we just finished, so that'll include bleachers and some pedestrian walkways to get to and from those bleachers. Maybe some restrooms. And then Andy has been adamant that to do this, we are going to need to fence this facility so that he can ticket people coming in and out. So we're going to work on a perimeter fence scheme. In addition to that, the administration has asked us to look at some alternates, including item 4 here, expanding parking. Parking is an issue here, although most people just solve the problem themselves and find a spot. So we're going to see what that investment would look like. Turfing the remaining 2 softball fields on this end, we're going to look at that and just get an alternate since we're out here turfing already. And then we've also been talking about a new competition grass field on this corner. So that requires relocating a few of the drives and then kind of sculpting that field, putting in a nice grass turf field, irrigation system, some stands, et cetera, to use there. And that gives then the high school 3 fields on this campus to schedule flexibly for flexibly, is that a word? For however they need to or for whatever programs need to use them.
don't love the coconut husk. The turf berms are significantly different than the rubber turf. I mean, I can send you some pictures, it's very cool. And I think that's why it's really slick. Even watching the football players play in the stadium this past fall, it's really, I don't know. It's probably healthier and safer and all the things, but it's just slightly different. As far as rugby, I think there's some challenges with goalposts. I think there's challenges, I would say if we're thinking of soccer, because I'm also a soccer mom, if we're utilizing and taking away the field at the high school, we don't have stadium seats for fields, I'm gonna call it field 1 and 2 at the top, the current quote-unquote rugby lacrosse fields that are getting utilized. And I am very serious when I say restrooms. We have a lot of grandparents in our community, and it is I think it is terrible. I mean, maybe I'm silly, but
Right there,
for
yeah.
them to walk, yes, where that red dot is. It is not an easy path to get there when it's A, freezing cold, B, when they can barely walk a far distance to begin with. So restrooms, I think, should be a priority up there somewhere in that 1-2 section. But as far as who would be utilizing 6 as grass, depending on the type of grass, depending on the season, sometimes soccer players prefer the grass when it's 900 degrees outside versus in the spring. They love turf because they never have to cancel a practice. It's very similar to softball. A lot of softball players honestly prefer not to have the turf, but with all the rain out days in the spring, I mean, I don't know, you could talk to 100 parents and give you 100 opinions, but that's what I hear when I'm talking.
We are, Brent, is that little white next to the tube, is that bleachers?
Yes.
Those aren't there.
Correct. Yeah, those are new bleachers there.
So
Yeah.
we'd have some bleachers there for sure, then we can look at the rest.
So if I'm gonna go watch the lacrosse game, where do I go?
Currently, field 1 or 2, for 10 minutes of 1.
Okay, and then soccer.
It'll be,
So at the high school. So like, in the
Yeah.
last fall,
It's gonna be 1 or 2.
One or two, okay.
yeah, so last fall, soccer flexed space at the high school, and girls and boys shared that field 2 and 1 along with the current high school field, because you have freshmen, JV varsity, both girls and boys sharing, well, they used to share 1 field, now they get to share 3 fields.
mhm.
Future, I guess they would then still just have 3, unless we want to talk about future projects.
Essentially, like, I'll say last year, or year before, we had, in the one field by the high school, we had boys soccer, freshman varsity, girls soccer, freshman varsity.
Yeah, and so
And then, but also
they would go
lacrosse.
to Graham Park. They would use fields at Graham Park
Yeah.
to get the job done. Yeah.
Wow.
This is the first year this spring where middle school has not used Green Park baseball fields. The 7th and 8th grade are sharing that north field. They haven't been able to, they haven't been able to use the south field because of the rain and so forth.
Mhm.
It was almost, I think it was dried out to the storm yesterday. But they just share that. So Doug, this is the first year that Doug hasn't had.
And if we went to Grand Park, we'd have to pay rent.
Well, we work on it.
They work, we've traded some time with them.
I think that, if I read it right when I was watching rugby, that's like 380 or 3 something to the center field fence. But is that big enough for high school, or we wanna use so we wanna use number 1 for high school?
Yeah, number 1 primarily because the orientation is the most ideal orientation for baseball. So north and east is preferred, north and west is second best. So somewhere up here.
Yeah, the current grading over there is not, it needs to be looked at. It floods and it can't grow grass for some reason.
Sounds like a punch list
There's a
item.
big, between the ELC and the bus zone, there's a big.
So I know the middle school girls have been playing softball here since it was built, but the high school girls, they're gonna go over here eventually when we move their field?
Yeah, so right now, timeline-wise, what we have told Andy at the high school is that they will play next spring on the fields at the high school, and after that, they're gone. So that everything will have to relocate.
So our girls' high school and JV started the season on the 2 turf fields, but after the first pitching game, they had the JV, we started varsity, JV, and these, and what they said was that then they were moved back to the high school when they dried out, and but they started here just because they could have both the JV and varsity, and they didn't have to worry about the field being solid. So, yeah, it worked out really well.
Eventually, they're gonna have to play their games here.
And we do not have the lights on the softball fields, I don't think.
I think we're gonna need to confirm that, but I don't think we do.
Yeah,
So we'll have to light
at least probably 2
two-
fields,
Yep,
because we have both multi-purpose and the north baseball field. I don't know that we need all 4 softball fields
lit.
lit right now. We could wire them and put the stadium.
Yeah, we can put the infrastructure in.
All right.
Community rooms. So right now, on the docket, we have community rooms at Monon Trail and Maple Glen scheduled to happen. The intent is to take these 2 community rooms as well as the work for the athletics at Monon and package those into one CMC proposal. So we'll be putting that together and getting that out to try to get a construction partner on board with us. And those, right now, the proposals, those are identical to the other community rooms at the other elementaries. We wanted to get that out early because when we come back and do renovations at these buildings, they'll help us with some additional space to move kids around. So planning on, yes. Then everybody's got them.
These 2 struggle with some DAC, before and after school care, and just because that really, once you have them, you don't know. And there is a story I just need to tell, I guess I should. When Tiffany Buzan got over there, she said, well, let's have our meeting, and she'd been at Cary in the community room, and they said, well, we don't have one. And she didn't believe him, so she actually walked down to the cafeteria and walked into where it was, and she's like, so she came back over here and said, why do we not have a community room? And I said, that question's asked, so we're gonna have a community
We're
room.
gonna figure it out.
Excellent.
And then I think this might be my last thing. So baseball fields at Shamrock Springs. So as that elementary finishes this winter, late fall, early winter, late fall, the plan is to build or replace the Little League fields that were there before we did the rebuild on that campus. So before natural turf fields, we're talking about maybe a sponsorship to do turf on the infield of those fields. We're gonna their previous fields is that bottom left corner. They had a center support building, so because WISI originally paid for the building that they built there, and then we tore it down to build the new elementary, we're gonna replace their building and put it back. Sidewalks and connect sidewalks. We're hopeful that we can just reuse or accommodate parking with the existing parking lots for the elementary that have been put in. So you can kind of see, I've kind of white out the area that's in my competitor's contract to do, and then so just the fields there in the center are what we'll be trying to complete here.
So we have, initially, our mom has bid the razzing, tearing down of Shamrock and just putting, filling it back into that big dirt pile that's there, and then just planting grass. We've asked them to work with CSO, to update that proposal to put the fields back in the building. For the most part, rainwater will be from the building. There should be sanitary water lines in there that we could use for the building. So they think it's a pretty cost effective, plus the infrastructure will be there for parking to return it. And then I will tell you that, WISI is the one that has some partners they're working with that might be able to share that can help them. If we just do it, it'll be grass. If they can get somebody to partner with some capital investment, then building in the middle is not the same shape, but it's the same square footage.
Yeah, so the fields in the kind of the bottom left photo, you can see that they're fairly spaced further apart, so the building in the center is longer than it is less and less square. So because of the compact nature of our site, we're gonna make the building more square, but we're gonna try to match the square footage that was there before. So we'll meet with WYSI to see what was in that building. I don't know that we have any records of that, and just,
And I learned something, the building that's out in our quadplex here matches the buildings they have at Grand Park.
it does, yeah,
Yeah, the concessions, the exact.
in the softball. So, yeah, if they like that one, we'll do that one. I have those drawings ready to go.
I think they had equipment to maintain the field,
Yeah, and there is which I don't know, we were confident. I think the storage building that's back here was WYSI's as well, and it looks like it's staying. Yeah,
They have a garage and it's staying, we've kept
yeah,
it.
it's right there.
Hold it up, and you can see right there, it has a little driveway, so it has stayed there, they just can't get to it right now.
Right.
We're opening it back
Yeah,
up.
we gotta-
That's where they keep their football equipment. Yeah, but they've been able to save that, they're gonna build it into the bus looking stuff. I don't think so. I think they,
Right there.
yeah.
Well, don't they use trailers now?
They're painting with storage. Yeah, they have one trailer, but it's not big enough to house all the equipment and everything that was,
Well-
kept upstairs at the old concession building.
So they're paving now, so let's talk to Brian Kelly to see, they may be able to access that building sooner and put some things back in it to get out of that
Yeah,
tech that much.
cancel.
Yeah.
Okay. So then, just so you guys are aware, what's coming next, what we're keeping our eye on. So this summer, we're hopeful that Westfield Middle School East will start, assuming we find a place to put it. And then fall 2026, we'll start conversations about the first elementary renovations at Washington Woods and Oak Trace. So those are kind of what's on deck and coming next.
We actually, one of the things I talked to Brent, because we were forced to have the conversations about where fifth grade goes, and I think everyone agreed that fifth grade would go into the fourth grade hallways, and then fourth grade moved into, I think it's what we call the second grade, and third grade stayed the same. Kindergarten, you now might get to where you're adding on to the new second grade wing, and then you'd have kindergarten first, second. So now that we have to live with it a little differently, how they talk to Brent about what they want may change.
Sure.
So
Fair enough.
we're excited to start those conversations, and those would begin at, Woods and Oak Trace, so the two oldest.
Yep,
So they'll be due for some infrastructure improvements.
yep, yeah, we'll go meet again, bathrooms, casework, lighting, all of the things that are now 25, 30 years old are due to be updated, so. I think that's it.
Thank you.
So if you're wondering what Brent was doing, what he's been doing,
It's been a busy spring.
all right, well, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you
you
very
guys.
much.
Appreciate the update. Last thing I have is, the board had talked about, we talked about switching to, we have two things going on, opening the new middle school and moving to, semesters in 27, 28. And so trying to adopt a calendar. One of the questions that was asked about Live Golf, I think we need to move forward in 27, assuming they're not going to be a part here, and just build the calendar best of our ability. So we have three things for you. The 26-27 calendar, which is coming up, that is the calendar that we are starting a little later. I've included that. What I want to note is that in 27, we will not, students' last day is June 3rd, teacher last day is June 4th. So that's just for context. At the end of next school year, we are going into June for the first time. With the semesters and trying to end the semesters, we have two draft calendars we're looking at. And so if you go to, one starts Teacher Days August 2nd, and one starts, so that's the green. The next one pushes it back a week and starts Teacher Days August 9th. So in the, I don't know that we numbered them, but the first student day on one is yellow August 5th. The second day is, the second one is August 12th. So you see, we can move almost everything in the second calendar into August. The difference between the two, because we're trying to get as many student days before the winter break, before the holidays, if you start a little earlier in that first week of August, you can end with 2 weeks, almost a full week before the Christmas Day, and then you come back earlier in January. On the second one, you can see you really need to go into the 21st, 22nd. That teacher work day we put in there, we can talk about, but then you come back and you take the whole week off. Our teachers have asked for 2 full weeks with weekends included, so you have 3 weekends over the winter break. So you would actually have a few more days there, but then when you push it all the way out, the last student day would be May 26th versus we end really early if we start early. And the 2 teachers' day that we're at the end, one of those can be, we've been flexed with, that's a summer work day, but we just put them there so we don't forget about them. But you could see we get everything done before June, and the teachers have, the 26, 27 calendar, we go into June because we're starting later, but they don't really want to start any later than what the 9, 10, 11 calendar is. So that's about as late as we can start and make it work.
For the second one for 27, 28 that ends before Memorial Day, what date is commencement? And I think the yellow highlight is wrong, because it says the end of the second.
Oh, yeah.
semester.
Yeah.
That's probably,
Is commencement the 26th?
I would assume so.
no, on which one?
The second, the finishing,
There's no
Oh,
date
yeah, yeah.
here and it's yellow?
Yeah, that's when I updated that, it didn't change that to the 26th. We were gonna end it on Thursday, but I missed a day. So Stacy, you have that, can you update that?
so the last day of school is the 26th.
For students,
And, yeah, and,
most likely that's been commencement.
got it.
They don't have them scheduled because we haven't adopted the calendar. So they wait till we adopt the calendar, then they reach out to Grand Park and,
And then these days are really 30
So
and
they go to
31?
school.
yeah,
So
Okay.
we'll fix that
can
too.
you explain, just so I think it's really important to understand, so that December calendar, that 20, 21st, and 22nd is when kiddos would be taking
Finals, right. Yep. And if you don't do it then, you're gonna take them,
after break.
they have, the high school said they do not want to do finals after break. They want to end the semester before break. So you're taking them that's what these 2 calendars present to you, is ending the semester before winter break, and you're taking the last 3 days, probably, you're taking finals.
But she's saying, what if a kid's sick? And they
Oh.
can't take it that day,
Yeah, you're gonna have to make those up.
So then you're taking it
after
after.
break,
Yeah,
either way.
yeah. Unless you can come in on the
It's a
20th.
work day.
Come in on the 23rd. I mean, on the other one, right, you're ending on the 16th, you'd have to come in on the 17th. Our schools are basically closed the week before. I mean,
Yeah.
So the way the high school does it now, though, the first day of finals is a half day, right? Like they only take one.
yeah, so you're gonna have 2 more finals. So you're gonna have 7 periods. So your finals, your days are gonna be, you're gonna need more days or figure out how to do it.
So how does that work, right? Or how many, you have 7 finals?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because you're gonna have 7
some
periods.
periods.
That's the difference. That's the beauty of the trimester, is that you
So how
only
do
have
you-
5 periods at
How
a
do you
time.
split that up for testing for days?
Well, you're either gonna have to be 2 or 3. Yeah. I think you'd go maybe, yeah,
It's
2,
like when they have the regular class, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
2, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, or 3.
Or you could do it over 3 days.
Yeah.
Well, I think
We
you
do
have-
it over 3 days now, so I
Right,
think,
I mean, to your point, it would be, I mean, we could use that, 23rd, that work day for kids to do, I mean, kids are, that's not ideal, but that,
It'd be a makeup day, you're
Makeup,
saying.
yeah.
but we could do that, and, you know,
I mean, some
this
people-
kind of works
I
itself
won't
out.
have high schoolers at that point, I'll just have elementary, so I'm indifferent, but I feel like
I mean, I think I'd,
otherwise you're starting way too early.
yeah.
Yeah, so,
I agree.
I'm
Either
gonna,
way, they're gonna have to
I promised everybody I work with that, I would say this.
so early.
Chris still here? Chris
He
took
left,
off.
Especially since it's been into June.
So when I moved into central office in 2004, they gave me all testing. So I became the testing coordinator, and they gave me the calendar. And at that time, the superintendent said, "We have a calendar committee. Everybody has an opinion on the calendar, and you work with the teachers and go with their opinion because they're impacted the most." He said, "Because you'll never make anybody happy, or everybody happy." So our calendar committee, I did want to share, the board was very adamant that we got good feedback the later we started. And this is the first major change that we've had, right? And so we want to process through this, not saying we want to hear what people have, but eventually we're gonna have to make a decision. So I do want to share this with the teachers before we take it for consideration. But as we've played with it, I think because the year before ends in June, and if we were to start that early, that summer seems really short.
Really short, it's 8 weeks and 3 days.
Yeah, and so this would be the one time where we push it back, try it, see what happens, and then, we gotta talk about the next one, but we are a little sensitive to the short summer, because we go into June to try to get as many days as we can. Then it makes it a little wonky at winter break time because of that, but we think that's probably better than starting as early as we had it. But again, we haven't, like the teachers, we're kind of just waiting to see. We wanted you to see it. And you don't have to, like, if you have questions, we can talk about it. You can take this with you and provide us feedback, because what we have found is sometimes people need to do that and just process a little bit.
Well, it sounds like Carmel's proposing to start the fall of 2026 on the 12th as well.
2027?
26 or 20?
28.
Well, it'll be the fall of 26.
Hey Stacy, your calendar for June of 28
That's-
is wrong.
Yeah, it's wrong?
It's wrong. That's actually the
Oh,
calendar
yeah.
for 27. The days are off. Because I was trying to
Next one over.
calculate, it should start on a
Maybe.
Thursday.
It starts
Yeah, see how that ends
Oh,
on
yeah.
Wednesday,
end of July.
Oh, yeah.
My days weren't tracking.
May,
So which
June,
one?
On the
July.
27, 28 ones.
Both
I got
versions,
27,
both
28.
versions, both
Yeah,
versions.
both versions.
The
Okay.
June
Well, actually, all
calendar at
three
the
of 'em.
bottom is
Well, the 26, 27's okay.
Yeah, 26,
It
27,
ends on a
okay,
Wednesday,
yep.
so this should start.
Yeah, we didn't go into June, so we didn't update it. We
Yeah.
just left it the way it was. See it? So we have some things we can clean
May,
up.
June.
Hopefully, you get the gist of what the options are. We can get students,
And so on.
either one, we can get students finished before Memorial Day.
I was just gonna say that, Dr. Rader, like, just from experiences having this in my own boys, three big things I think that always came up was start of school, you push it back, you get finals done before December, and then could you get done before Memorial Day? You can knock out those three, like,
Yeah.
to me, that was the trifecta of the win. Now, depending on how our days are different, because we're not on that balanced calendar, but that allows us to do all those things and still start a little later in 27 in August.
The other thing that's really,
Yeah.
with that, starting early, on that calendar, you have, then you push your new teacher into August, and then our leadership summit is July 22nd. So all that can move back a week. I mean, it's really gonna feel for those teachers that are involved in the summit like there was no summer, because they're going late, and then they're actually starting the summit a week earlier.
Yeah, it's a quick turnaround for that summer. Now, on the back end, you're ending earlier, so
Yeah.
you make it up, but it's.
Well, we'll clean up the issues you pointed out, and if you have any other questions or thought, right now what I hear is that you're liking starting later.
I think parents would like starting later.
Yeah, starting as late as possible and making it work. And then we'll get feedback from our teachers as well. Anything else we need to consider? We appreciate this. It's kind of becomes very tedious going from calendar to calendar and trying to track everything. Stacy does a great job of trying to color code it, but then I say, hey, move this, or I actually move it myself, and then I don't tell her, and she's like, did you move something?
So this is,
Cat's out of the bag. Cat's out of the bag.
She needs to have one copy I can mess with, and then one copy she doesn't let me mess with.
so this is the one where we start August 5th. This is the one where we start August 12th.
Right.
What is the advantage of starting the 5th? I mean, there must be some reasons you created this.
Yeah, it gets more days before the winter break. The days aren't balanced. And then you're pushing up closer to Christmas. Now, again, Bill, I'm a little indifferent. You know, I work.
This is our traditional Christmas break schedule. This one splits it into
I will
two.
tell you.
Yeah, I work.
A lot of people, like, they're like me. I would work up to Christmas Eve every year, and then
Yeah,
teachers
like
love
most
having that time after New Year's. I would think
Yep.
so.
So I have to tell you, I've done this, and we had one time where we said, end a little earlier. It's not fair to our, teachers, especially preparing, that have kids preparing for. And then what they said is, it gets done no matter how late I work out. I need break after the holidays, and so I want to come back. So we always went, but it's one of those things, again, you feel differently about it, but getting some break after the holiday. Now, the flip side of that, if you go a little late, you will hear from our parents who are back in their work, is when you're gonna get those kids back in school, right? Like,
It's 2 weeks either way.
yeah, it
Yeah,
is,
it's
it
2
is,
weeks,
you're
yeah.
exactly right.
If they're balancing, it's 2 weeks either way.
It's 2 weeks either way.
Yeah.
Taking PTO.
So, and again, that's what I say, it's
I mean, I'll be
it's
watching
what
TV.
our educators really prefer at that point, because it's 2 weeks either way. And what serves them the best as they wrap it. Yeah, they do in that one, because we can't go to Friday. But hey, good for them. All right, if you have any, you can send any thoughts that you didn't get a chance to share to Stacy. We'll clean that up and I'll put a fresh copy out on Friday, and if we can get consensus, we'll maybe try to adopt it in May, because people have been asking for it, haven't
Oh,
they?
yeah.
And
I
the
need to be
CSO.
reminded. Oh, sorry. Can I ask one more calendar question first? I forget why, but isn't it better to have a few more days in the second, there's things that happen here for testing or whatnot,
Yeah.
A
that
lot
they
more
need
testing
extra
and-
testing days.
Yeah,
So
I
you
learned-
do want, there's 4 more days in this proposal for first semester versus second, but that 4 days is gobbled up. Otherwise, it would infringe on instruction time, right?
Yeah, and the high school was trying to balance them as much as they could, is what they said, but they'll make it work. But traditionally, there is some testing dates, second semester.
That you don't otherwise have,
Yep,
yeah,
yep,
okay,
that I learned that eat in there, but
And they
okay.
would kinda,
I thought so,
they
but,
kind of adjust, they kind of move things up a little bit, so like you're right, but they'll have to adjust for that regardless.
No matter what, okay, all right, sorry, thank you, Mike. CSO question?
Yep, CSO, can we get that video?
The slide, yep, we'll put that.
I didn't see it.
For tonight, re-log in.
Okay.
Do you want me, you just gonna grab it there? You want me
Yeah,
to
I'll
put
grab
it
it
in
out
the
the
wrap up,
board
or
docs.
is it okay in the
Yes,
docs?
that's good. I mean,
Okay.
as long as I got access to it. I'm good
All
with
right.
that.
Okay, so before we adjourn, I want to thank everyone who joined us this evening. If any other board members have any comments or closing thoughts?
No, I thought it went very well, and I like the update. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I'm good.
Okay, Carrie? Amber?
I think she's good.
You think she's good? Any closing comments or questions? You're good, okay. All right, well, we appreciate the thoughtful discussion and all the work that goes into all of these items. Thank you, gentlemen, and your team. If there's no further